Well, for more on this, let's go to Alexander Titov, a lecturer at Queen's University in Belfast. Alexander, great to have you with us. Ukraine's President Poroshenko has urged NATO to send ships to the Sea of Azov. Isn't this a tall order from a non-NATO member? I mean, does NATO even have the capacity to send troops or ships to defend a non-member?
Well, I think it has capacity, but there's no political will. I think what the events since 2014 have shown is that despite all the rhetoric, nobody is really in the West would want to fight Russia over Ukraine. Economic sanctions are fine, diplomatic support is fine, financial support to Ukraine is fine, but nobody is actually prepared to fight. So, I mean, that's the bottom line, and it remains the same, despite the excellent encouragement.
How does Europe view this latest Russian aggression against Ukraine? Do they think that this is a seriously grave threat? I mean, Europe and NATO didn't do much apart from issue condemnations when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea. Why should it be different this time?
Well, I mean, they imposed series of sanctions on Russia for Crimea. But the bottom line with this incident is actually it still goes back to the fundamental issue of sovereignty over Crimea, and Russia is determined to impose its red lines that Crimea is theirs, the territorial waters is Russian. And Ukraine will have to accept that. In the absence of any progress over Crimea, I think this will likely to remain. Although I think there is a room for maneuver for both sides in terms of if Ukraine is most important thing for Ukraine is to have a free passage through the Kerch Sea. Russia is obliged to provide it, but perhaps on some conditions of following Russian procedures through the passage. But at the moment, particularly with the issue of Ukrainian elections coming up, any kind of conciliatory moves on both sides are very unlikely.
Well, I wanted to touch on that next. Putin has accused Poroshenko of basically creating this naval provocation to boost his ratings ahead of the elections. Do you think that that's the case?
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I think there are two things. Well, okay, there's a fundamental issue of access to Azov Sea, which is strategic issue for Ukraine, and any Ukrainian president would be concerned about that. But with elections only 4 months away and President Poroshenko very unlikely to win it with 8% approval rating, using the Kerch precedent to engineer some sort of standoff with Russia and hopefully boost his popularity, I think is a perfectly logical thing to do for Poroshenko. And the way how they impose the martial law, try to impose the martial law, is very indicative that it certainly is a factor in Ukrainian politics, which Poroshenko is trying to use to the full.
All right, Alexander Titov out of Belfast, thanks for your thoughts.